There's a moment many people don't expect after 60. Not a big event. Just a quiet realization. Life feels calmer. But also emptier. The days move at a gentler pace. There's less noise. Less rushing. And fewer people pulling at your attention. At first, this can feel like a relief. But over time, being alone can start to work on you in subtle ways. Not in ways that alarm you, but in ways that slowly shape how you feel about yourself. Some people begin to feel lighter, more settled, more comfortable in their own skin. Others, without fully noticing, feel a different shift. Their emotional energy becomes easier to drain. Motivation softens. And quiet moments begin to feel heavier than they used to. What's important to understand is this. Being alone itself isn't the problem. And it's not about having more friends, or fewer friends. The real difference lies in how a person relates to their own company. When that relationship weakens, even peaceful days can quietly strain the mind. But when it strengthens, solitude can become a source of calm, stability, and quiet confidence. That's why being happy alone after 60 is rarely about personality or luck. It usually grows from a few small inner shifts that most people were never taught. And the first of these shifts is often the most overlooked. Because it isn't about filling your time. It's about changing what the quiet actually means to you. Number 1. Redefining what being alone actually means. Many people carry an unspoken belief into later life. That being alone means something has gone wrong. No one says it out loud. But it lingers quietly in the background. If I were doing life properly, I wouldn't be spending this much time on my own. So when life naturally becomes quieter after 60, the mind doesn't simply notice the silence. It judges it. Being alone gets mistaken for being left behind. Or forgotten, or no longer needed. At first, this belief feels small, almost invisible. But over time, it quietly shapes how the body and mind respond to everyday life. Moments of calm start to feel uncomfortable. Stillness feels like something to escape from. And even peaceful days can carry a subtle emotional strain. Here's the shift most people never make. Being alone and being unsupported are not the same thing. Being alone simply means there is space. Fewer demands. Fewer interruptions. But when that space is interpreted as loss, the nervous system stays slightly alert. Always waiting. Always scanning for something to fill the gap. Many older adults who struggle with solitude aren't struggling because they're alone. They're struggling because they've been taught to see aloneness as failure. Those who feel steadier often do something very different. They redefine the word entirely. Alone becomes time that belongs to them. Not time they have to justify. Not time they need to apologize for. One man shared that after retiring, his days felt uncomfortable. Not because they were empty, but because he believed they should be fuller. When he stopped asking what his days were missing, and started asking what his days allowed, the tension softened. Nothing about his schedule changed, but his relationship with quiet did. This is why approach one matters so much. Because if being alone is misunderstood, every other effort feels heavier than it needs to be. But when aloneness is seen as neutral, or even supportive, the body relaxes. The mind settles, and the day opens up. And once this new definition begins to take hold, the next step becomes possible. Because it isn't about changing your mindset. It's about gently giving your days a shape, so quiet time stops drifting and starts grounding you. Number 2. Creating gentle structure in quiet days. One of the less obvious challenges of being alone more often after 60 is this. Days can begin to lose their edges. Nothing feels wrong, exactly. But mornings, afternoons, and evenings start to blend. Without clear markers, Time slips by more quietly than we expect. When days lose structure, the mind often follows. Motivation softens. Focus drifts. And a subtle restlessness can settle in, even when life appears calm. This isn't about being busy. It's about being anchored. Gentle structure gives the day a rhythm. Not a schedule that pressures you, but a pattern that reassures you. These structures are personal. They don't need to look productive to anyone else. They simply need to be predictable enough to return to. For some people, it's beginning the morning the same way each day. A cup of tea by the window. A few minutes of quiet reading. Stepping outside to feel the air before the day begins. For others, it's marking the evening. Lighting a lamp at the same time. Preparing a simple meal with care. Taking a familiar walk as the light fades. These moments do something important. They tell the nervous system, this day has shape. I know where I am in it. One woman shared that after living alone, her weeks felt long and indistinct. She wasn't unhappy, just ungrounded. She chose one small anchor. Every afternoon, she paused for 10 minutes with a cup of tea. No phone. No task. Over time, that pause became a reference point. Her days felt calmer, more contained. The quiet stopped drifting and started settling. Psychologists often explain that simple routines reduce mental strain. They restore a sense of control. And they create small moments of completion that quietly strengthen confidence. This approach matters because without structure, quiet can slowly drain energy. With structure, quiet becomes supportive. If this feels familiar to you, take a moment to comment number 2 below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you're welcome to do so and turn on notifications. Your support helps us keep creating calm, thoughtful content like this. And once gentle structure is in place, another shift becomes possible. Because it isn't about your schedule at all. It's about keeping your mind awake, without forcing it to stay busy. Number 3. Keeping the mind awake, not busy. As life becomes quieter after 60, something subtle can begin to happen in the background. The mind isn't challenged as often. Not because intelligence fades, but because curiosity is used less. Many people assume mental decline arrives suddenly. In reality, it often works quietly. Through long stretches of mental sameness. The days repeat. The thoughts repeat. And without realizing it, the mind starts to coast. This doesn't mean you need to stay busy. Constant activity can actually exhaust the mind further. What matters is gentle stimulation. An awake mind feels engaged. A busy mind feels pressured. There's an important difference. When the mind isn't gently challenged, thinking can feel slower. Decision-making takes more effort. And motivation becomes easier to drain. Not dramatically. Just enough to reduce confidence over time. Keeping the mind awake doesn't require formal study or mastering new technology. It simply means giving the brain something new to notice. For some people, that might be learning about a topic they've always been curious about. History. Gardening. A place they've never visited. For others, it's small mental stretches. Taking a different walking route. Reading a short article outside their usual interests. Asking new questions instead of settling for familiar answers. One older man shared that after retiring, his days felt comfortable, but mentally flat. He wasn't bored, just unstimulated. He chose one simple habit. Each week, he picked one topic he knew nothing about and spent a little time exploring it. No pressure to remember everything. No goal to master it. Within months, he noticed a change. He felt sharper, more engaged, and more confident in conversations. Psychologists often explain that the brain responds best to novelty without stress. Small challenges signal growth, not threat. This approach matters because when the mind stays awake, emotional resilience improves too. Curiosity keeps perspective flexible. It prevents the quiet narrowing that can make life feel smaller than it is. Being happy alone after 60 isn't about filling your calendar. It's about keeping your inner world active. And once the mind feels awake again, another shift becomes possible. Because it isn't about thinking at all. It's about letting the body gently lead the mind back into balance. Number 4. Letting the body lead the mind back into balance. When life becomes quieter after 60, many people try to solve discomfort by thinking their way out of it. They reflect more, analyze more, replay thoughts longer than they used to. But there's a quiet truth that often gets overlooked. The mind doesn't always lead the body. Very often, it's the other way around. When the body stays still for long periods, the mind can slowly tighten. Energy feels harder to access. Small worries linger longer. And emotional resilience quietly weakens. This isn't about exercise in the traditional sense. It's about movement as communication. Gentle movement tells the nervous system that life is still flowing. That you're safe. That you're present. Without it, the body can slip into a kind of low-level alertness. Muscles stay tense. Breathing becomes shallow. And even calm days begin to feel heavier than they should. Many older adults don't notice this happening. They just feel a bit flatter. A bit less steady. What helps is allowing the body to move first, before the mind tries to catch up. This might look very simple. A slow walk outside, noticing light and sound. Stretching the body after sitting too long. Standing near a window and taking a few deeper breaths. Nature plays a quiet role here as well. Natural light. Fresh air. Open space. These elements gently reset the nervous system. They don't demand anything. They don't judge. They simply invite the body to soften. One woman shared that after months of spending most days indoors, she felt mentally restless but physically heavy. She didn't feel sad. Just stuck. She began taking a short walk each afternoon. Not for fitness. Not for steps. Just to move and notice the world again. Within weeks, she noticed her thoughts felt less crowded. Her sleep improved slightly. And the quiet in her home felt less pressing. Psychologists often explain this as bottom-up regulation. When the body settles, the mind follows. This approach matters because when the body is ignored, the mind carries the full weight of emotional balance. Over time, that load becomes harder to hold. But when movement and nature are gently reintroduced, balance returns more naturally. Without force. Without effort. If this approach feels meaningful to you, consider commenting number 4 below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you're welcome to do so and turn on notifications. Your support helps us continue creating calm, supportive content like this. And once the body begins to support the mind again, another layer comes into focus. Because it isn't about habits or movement at all. It's about how you stay emotionally connected, even when no one else is around. Number 5. Staying emotionally connected without depending on other people. As social contact naturally changes after 60, many people experience a quiet emotional shift they don't immediately recognize. They're not lonely in the dramatic sense. They don't feel abandoned. But something feels less steady. This often happens when emotional connection has been built almost entirely around other people. Conversations. Company. Being needed. When those moments become less frequent, the emotional system can feel unanchored. Not empty. Just unsettled. Over time, this can quietly weaken emotional resilience. Mood becomes more reactive. Small disappointments feel heavier. And quiet moments begin to feel uncomfortable. What's rarely discussed is this. Emotional connection doesn't disappear when people aren't around. But it does need a new place to live. Some older adults continue to feel emotionally grounded even when alone. Not because they don't value relationships, but because their emotional world isn't dependent on constant external input. They stay connected to meaning, to memory, to values, to contribution. This might look simple. Revisiting old photographs and reflecting on what those moments shaped. Writing brief notes about what still matters to you. Caring for something, a plant, an animal, a small responsibility, that responds to your presence. One man shared that after his circle of friends became smaller, he felt emotionally adrift. Not sad, just disconnected. He began writing short letters to his grandchildren each month. Not expecting replies. Not looking for praise. Just sharing observations. What he noticed in the world. What he hoped they might remember. Over time, he noticed something change. Even on quiet days, he felt emotionally present. Connected to life. Not waiting for it to arrive. Psychologists often explain that emotional stability strengthens when meaning is internal as well as external. When feelings aren't outsourced entirely to other people. This approach matters because emotional dependence can quietly drain confidence, while emotional self-connection builds steadiness. Being happy alone after 60 doesn't mean closing yourself off. It means knowing that your emotional world doesn't collapse when no one is nearby. And once this kind of connection begins to settle, the final approach becomes possible. Because it isn't about connection, habits, or movement. It's about learning to trust your own presence, fully. Number 6. Learning to trust your own presence. As life grows quieter after 60, many people experience a subtle but powerful question. Not spoken out loud. Not always conscious. Am I enough when I'm by myself? This question doesn't arrive suddenly. It builds over time. Through quiet mornings. Long afternoons. Evenings with fewer interruptions. When life was louder, self-trust often came from outside. From roles. From responsibilities. From being needed. But as those roles shift or soften, confidence can quietly follow them out the door. Not because you've changed, but because the source of reassurance has moved. What replaces it is important. Some people begin to doubt themselves in subtle ways. They second-guess their choices. They fill silence with distraction. They wait for something or someone to confirm they're doing life right. Over time, this quiet waiting can strain the mind. It reduces emotional resilience. And it makes peaceful days feel oddly unsettled. But there is another path. Trusting your own presence means believing that you are safe company for yourself. That you don't need constant validation to feel steady. That your thoughts, your pace, and your way of being are enough. This doesn't mean withdrawing from the world. It means no longer fearing your own company. Many older adults who feel deeply settled share one common trait. They are comfortable being alone with their thoughts. Not because their thoughts are always pleasant, but because they trust themselves to handle them. One woman shared that after her partner passed away, evenings felt overwhelming. Not because she was lonely in the usual sense, but because she no longer trusted the quiet. She filled her nights with noise, television, background voices, anything to avoid being alone with herself. Over time, she noticed feeling more tired, more unsettled, not less. So she began experimenting with short moments of intentional quiet. 5 minutes at first. Sitting with a cup of tea. No distractions. It wasn't easy. But slowly, something shifted. She realized she could sit with herself and be okay. The quiet stopped feeling threatening. It began to feel honest. Psychologists often explain that self-trust grows through exposure, not avoidance. By staying present with ourselves in small doses. By proving, gently, that we can meet our own experience without collapsing. This approach matters because without self-trust, independence feels fragile. With it, independence feels calm. Being happy alone after 60 isn't about being strong all the time. It's about knowing you don't fall apart when nothing distracts you. When you trust your own presence, quiet moments stop asking for justification. They simply exist. And you exist with them. If you followed all 6 approaches, you may have noticed something important. None of them ask you to become someone new. They don't require a bigger social life, or constant activity, or forced positivity. They ask for something gentler, a shift in how you relate to yourself, to your days, to your inner world. Happiness in later life isn't loud. It doesn't rush in. It settles. It grows when solitude is understood, not resisted. When days have shape. When the mind stays awake. When the body supports balance. When emotional connection comes from within. And when you trust yourself enough to sit quietly and remain whole. Being alone after 60 doesn't mean life is shrinking. Often, it means life is asking you to meet it differently. And when you do, something steady emerges. Not excitement. Not distraction. But quiet strength. If this video resonated with you, you're welcome to share which approach stood out most. Simply comment the number below. And if you'd like more calm, thoughtful reflections on healthy, independent aging, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Your presence here helps this space continue to grow. Thank you for spending this quiet time with us.